the 5,000-year-old secret behind Beauty and the Beast. Let's not pretend this is just a fairy tale. A girl, a beast, a cursed castle. We were told it was about love, a story of patience, kindness, and seeing beyond appearances. But it's not. Hidden beneath the rose petals and enchanted mirrors is something far older. Older than castles, older than kingdoms, older even than writing itself. Because Beauty and the Beast is not just a tale of transformation, it is a ritual, a myth remembered in fragments, and it may go back 5,000 years to the very first moment humans feared what they could not name and tried to love it anyway. Once upon a time, though not too long ago to be forgotten, there was a merchant. He had ships, wealth, and 6 children, 3 sons, 3 daughters, but like all fortunes in stories such as these, his crumbled without warning. One storm, one betrayal, one ruin. And so the merchant, broken and penniless, retreated to the countryside with his children. Among them was the youngest daughter. She was gentle, quiet, fond of books. She asked for nothing, except one thing, a rose. When news came that one of the merchant's ships had survived the wreck, he saddled a horse and rode toward what he thought would be salvation. He found none. The ship had been looted. The promise was false, and in the snow, lost in the woods, he wandered until he found a gate. A castle. Empty. Fire still warm. Bread still soft. A ghost of hospitality. He stayed the night, trembling with hunger and confusion. And when morning came, he saw a garden, and in it a rose. He picked it for his daughter. And that was his mistake. The beast appeared, furred, fanged. Not quite animal, not quite man. "You have stolen from me," he said, "and for that you must die." The merchant begged, explained, wept. The beast listened. Then he offered a different punishment. "Return home, say goodbye to your family. Then send one of your daughters in your place. No sword, no chains, just a bargain." And that was worse. The merchant returned, broken again. He told his children. The eldest daughters wept, the sons argued, but the youngest, she packed her bag, she kissed her father, and she went. The castle welcomed her with silence. Doors opened, food appeared, candles lit themselves, and the beast, he did not touch her, he did not growl, he only asked one question every night at dinner. "Will you marry me?" And every night she said no, not out of cruelty but out of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of what love might become when wrapped in fur and sorrow. Still the days passed. He was kind, she was curious. And something strange began to happen. She dreamed of him, not the beast, but a man, alone, dying beneath stone arches. She asked to visit her family. The beast allowed it, but begged her to return, and she didn't, not right away. When she dreamed of him next, he was dying. She ran, she returned. She found him curled in the garden, breath shallow, and at last she said yes. Yes to what was strange, yes to what she could not explain, yes to the thing she had once feared, and in that moment the beast vanished, and in his place stood a prince, cursed for pride, freed by love. They married. The castle awoke, the enchantment ended. That is the story they tell us, a tale of looking past the surface, of patience rewarded, of love transforming what is monstrous. But stories remember more than we allow, and this one remembers something we've tried to forget, because the beast has worn many shapes, and not all of them were saved. We think we know this tale, but the version we remember, the one of Disney castles, swirling gowns, and love's redemptive kiss, is only a shadow. It wasn't written by the Brothers Grimm, it wasn't born in the minds of men, it came from a woman, and she told it very differently. Her name was Gabrielle Suzanne de Villeneuve, a widow living in 18th century France. In 1740 she published La Belle et la Bête, Beauty and the Beast. But it was not a fairy tale for children. It was a strange, sprawling adult story filled with memory, trauma, and the ache of transformation. Her beauty was older, wiser, lonely. Her beast was complex, sorrowful, magical. And their love did not blossom in a few nights over enchanted dinners, but through pain, silence, and dreams of another life. Villeneuve's story was a mirror, not just of romance, but of exile, of being cast out by society, by wealth, by your own reflection. Beauty in her story was not a poor girl. She was a lost princess, hidden away, unaware of her origin. The beast was not merely cursed, he was condemned by fairies, caught in a war between ancient beings of law and chaos. This version was forgotten. 16 years later, another woman, Jeanne-Marie Le Prince de Beaumont, rewrote the tale. Shorter, simpler, stripped of politics, stripped of mythology, made palatable, a girl, a rose, a beast, a marriage, a cautionary tale for little girls learning obedience. Her version spread. It reached salons, then chapbooks, then nursery books. And like all stories that survive, it did so by becoming less dangerous. But something survived the edits, something strange, a residue. Because even in the softened version, the beast is never fully explained. Why must he ask the same question every night? Why must love come in the form of pity? Why must beauty say yes to the thing she fears in order for him to become human? The fairy tale does not answer, but myth might, because long before Villeneuve, long before Beaumont, there were other beasts, other girls, other bargains, a pattern, etched across cultures like a wound that refuses to close, and in each the same question: what does it mean to love what terrifies us? Villeneuve once wrote that fairy tales are the dreams of reason in times of silence. But silence is never empty. In her original text, the castle is not enchanted, it is haunted by history. The beast is not a monster, he is a memory. And beauty? She is every woman who has had to choose survival over understanding, kindness over clarity, trust over power. So when we look at the roots of this tale, beneath the lace and roses, we find something darker. Not just a love story, but a warning, a whisper from women who lived in silence, who wrote their pain in fables, and buried it deep in the stories they knew would outlive them. Because fairy tales were never meant to entertain, they were meant to remember. He growls, he limps, he hides in shadow, and yet he offers shelter. A seat at his table, a rose in his garden, he is the monster who is gentle, the danger that waits not to strike but to be seen. The beast is not just a character, he is a symbol, an archetype as old as myth itself. Across cultures and centuries, the beastly figure appears in every form: a cursed prince, a horned god, a man with the head of a bull, a being of power and sorrow trapped between two worlds, animal and divine. Psychologists call it the shadow. Carl Jung described it as the repressed self, the part we hide, deny, exile. It is desire without form, anger without voice, love twisted into something we fear because we cannot understand it. In dreams, it comes as a creature. In myths, it wears fur or scales or hooves. But it always asks the same thing. Will you look at me? Will you stay? Will you still call me human? In ancient Greece, the Minotaur lived in a labyrinth, half man, half beast. He was not evil, he was forgotten. The shame of a king, the secret of a queen. In Mesopotamia there was Enkidu Sidir Kidu, born wild, covered in hair, drinking with animals. He was the other half of the hero Gilgamesh, untamed, honest, and yet doomed the moment he was civilized. In Norse myth, Fenrir, the great wolf, was bound in fear by gods who knew that one day he would bring their end. He was the beast prophesied to destroy the world, so they locked him away, but not because he was wicked, because he was inevitable. The beast is not just a monster. He is a truth no one wants to name, a father's anger, a lover's violence, a boy's vulnerability punished into silence. When the fairy tale says, he asks her every night, "Will you marry me?" It is not romance. It is a ritual, the repetition of a plea that has echoed through every generation of men who are taught never to cry. He does not force her. He waits, and when she runs, he does not chase. He curls beneath a rosebush and prepares to die, because even in fairy tales, the beast always dies before the man can live. And what of his home? The castle is not merely enchanted, it is frozen, stuck in time, mirrors do not reflect, dishes sing to themselves. It is a house of isolation, of memory, of punishment. Some believe it is a metaphor for trauma, a mind split from the world waiting to be reached. Others say it is a kind of underworld. And beauty is the one who descends to retrieve the soul. Whatever it is, it was not made for her, but it opens only for her. And that matters, because the beast in every telling is not freed by a sword, nor by magic, but by something far older and more terrifying: recognition. She sees him, she does not flinch, and she says, yes. Not because he has changed, but because she has. We talk about the beast, we try to understand his shadow, his sorrow, his cage of fur and silence. But we forget the other half, the girl. They call her Beauty, not a name but a title, as if her purpose is only to be seen. But she is more than gentle, more than kind, more than obedient. She enters a cursed place. She walks willingly into a house ruled by death and stillness. And instead of screaming, she speaks. "Thank you for the meal. May I see the garden? May I return?" she asks. She moves, she sees, and slowly everything in that dead castle begins to breathe again. In stories across the ancient world there is a figure like her. A woman. Sometimes a goddess, sometimes a mortal girl. She is sent, offered, exchanged, sacrificed. She leaves her home and enters a world that does not belong to her. And in doing so she transforms it. The Sumerians called her Inanna. She descended into the underworld stripped of her garments, her status, her breath. And when she returned, life returned with her. The Greeks knew her as Persephone, taken by the god of death. Half the year she lives below, and when she rises the earth blooms again. In Egypt, Isis searches for the torn body of Osiris. She gathers each piece, she speaks his name, she weeps, and in her grief the Nile floods, bringing life to the desert. Beauty walks into the beast's castle like Inanna into the dark. She carries no weapons, no spells, only a question, a presence, and a promise. She stays, and in doing so she breaks the curse, not through force but through witnessing. In the oldest myths, women were not passive. They were bridges between worlds. They walked where others feared to. They knew that some things must die in order for life to return. So when Beauty finds the beast dying in his garden, it is not just a scene of pity, it is a ritual. The garden is sacred. It is where transformation happens. It is where the wild becomes beautiful, and the beautiful becomes wild again. A rose grows in winter. A beast dies in her arms. A man is born. But why a rose? Not a jewel, not a crown. A flower, one with thorns, with fragrance, with blood. In ancient Persia, the rose was the flower of Anahita, the goddess of water, fertility and battle. In Christianity, the rose is sacred to Mary, a symbol of love and sacrifice. In alchemy, it is the sign of unfolding transformation, something hidden, blooming, revealing its true form. Beauty asks only for a rose, and what she receives is a choice, to accept a life of ease with no love, or to walk toward the monster and see if there is a man inside. She chooses the second, and by doing so she becomes more than the good daughter. She becomes a priestess, a goddess, a soul-bringer, because the story does not end with her being loved. It ends with her choosing to love, long before the beast dined by candlelight, long before Beauty walked a marble corridor in a gown of silk. There were others, not in fairy tales, but in myth, not in enchanted castles, but in clay tablets, stone temples, and the oral breath of firelit rituals. They were not called beast, but they were known and feared and sometimes loved. In the oldest known epic, the Epic of Gilgamesh, written over 4,000 years ago in Sumer, there is a wild man, Enkidu. He runs with animals, drinks from rivers, his body is covered in hair, his strength divine. He is untamed, raw, not evil, only untouched by the world of men. The gods create him to humble Gilgamesh, the tyrant king. But when they meet, they do not fight. They become brothers. Enkidu is civilized through love, through the touch of a woman, Shamhat, who teaches him language, dress, tenderness. And when he dies, the world shatters. Even Gilgamesh, the demigod, weeps for the beast that made him human. In Greek myth there is the Minotaur, the monstrous child of a queen and a divine bull. He is hidden in a labyrinth, fed human flesh, treated as shame. No name, no voice, until Theseus comes. With sword, with thread, with destiny. He slays the beast. Hero wins. But what if the story is told from inside the maze? What if the Minotaur was never cruel, only exiled? What if the real horror was being born different? In the ancient forests of the Celts, the figure of the green man appears, a face made of leaves, a creature who dies each winter, only to return each spring. Wild, watchful, woven into nature, he is the beast who is also the land, fertile, dangerous, necessary. And in India, we find Hanuman, a monkey god devoted and powerful. He speaks, he loves, he burns cities to save truth. He is animal and divine, and he is worshipped. What ties these beings together? They are not villains, they are not humans, they are thresholds between wild and tamed, between instinct and law, between fear and reverence, and in nearly every version of their story a woman arrives. She touches, she speaks, she does not run. Sometimes she civilizes them, sometimes she frees them, sometimes she weeps as others destroy them, but always she sees them. This is the mythic skeleton beneath Beauty and the Beast. A girl walks into the forest. A creature waits, not to devour, but to be known. In ancient rites, women were once initiators, not just lovers. They were dream walkers, mediators, healers, the ones who looked into the eyes of what no one else could name. And perhaps that is what we are remembering here. Not just a girl and a monster, but an ancient ritual. A sacred meeting between what is human and what is not, and the moment they recognize each other. In the end, the beastly figures of ancient myth rarely survive. They are tamed, slain, transformed. And that is the price of coming too close to the human world. But in Beauty and the Beast, the miracle is different. The beast is not destroyed. He is changed. Because she chooses him. Not in spite of his strangeness, but because she saw something inside it that reminded her of herself. "Will you marry me?" He asks it every night. Not as a demand, not as a threat, but as a ritual. A question asked by something old to something just beginning. And every night she says no. Not because she does not care, but because she understands what the question costs. In fairy tales, love is offered like a reward and a prize for kindness, for goodness. But in older stories, stories whispered before there were books, love is not a prize, it is a price. In ancient Carthage, the god Moloch was fed the lives of firstborn children. Not because he was cruel, but because people believed only what you love most is worthy of sacrifice. In the Bible, Abraham raises a knife over his own son, not in hatred, but in obedience, to prove to God that nothing, not even blood, would stand between them. In the Vedic texts, kings give up power, warriors give up weapons, lovers give up flesh. Because love was not soft, it was sacred, and sacred things are always paid for, or poor. So when the beast asks, "Will you marry me?" he is not asking for affection. He is asking her to surrender, to give up safety, to step across the threshold, to accept not what is beautiful, but what is strange. It is a trial, a test, a gate carved not in stone but in fear. And when she finally says yes, it is not because he has changed, but because she has. She chooses him knowing what he is: fur, claws, silence, sadness. She chooses the unknown, and that is the sacrifice. Modern retellings make it gentle. They soften the teeth. They polish the mirror. But in the old versions, especially Villeneuve's, the choice is brutal. Beauty weeps. She dreams of death. She questions her sanity. And still she returns. She finds him dying in the garden, not because he was hurt, but because her absence broke the spell. Because love, in these stories, is not about possession. It is about presence. It is not what you give, it is what you are willing to lose. Even the rose is part of the bargain, a symbol of blood and bloom, a gift that costs a life. In some tellings, the beast dies when the last petal falls. In others, the rose is what curses him. It marks time, it marks longing. It reminds us that love, like all sacred things, must be chosen before it disappears. Some scholars believe that Beauty and the Beast is not a story about romance at all, but about initiation, that the beast represents fear, and the girl's journey is a ritual to confront it, to touch it, to name it, to stay even when every instinct says run, and that love, real love, begins not when we are safe but when we are afraid and choose to stay anyway. In the end, the beast becomes a man, but not because she kissed him, not because of magic, but because she said, "Yes, I see you, and I will not leave." And in that moment the curse breaks, because to be seen and still chosen is the most powerful spell of all. Before the curse is broken, before the beast transforms, something must be said. Not screamed, not shouted, just spoken. "I love you." 3 words. And yet, in the oldest layers of myth, these are not words of emotion. They are incantations, because in the ancient world, to speak something aloud was to make it real. Words were not ornaments. They were weapons. They were gates. They were spells. In the book of Genesis, God does not carve mountains or mix oceans. He speaks, "Let there be light." And there was light. In ancient Egypt, the god Ptah shapes the universe through breath and voice. His words mould the world as if sound were substance. The Vedic traditions speak of Vak, the goddess of speech, whose syllables are the seed of all existence. And in the Torah, the unspeakable name of God, YHWH, is so powerful that to utter it aloud is to touch divinity itself. So when beauty speaks, when she whispers love into a dying body, it is not just tenderness, it is creation. It is the rewriting of a curse. It is the breaking of silence. It is language becoming miracle. Fairy tales have always known this. In Rumpelstiltskin, the girl must guess the name. In The Little Mermaid, the voice is the prince. In Sleeping Beauty, a single word, spoken or withheld, brings either death or awakening. Words define the curse, Putin's define the cure, and perhaps that is why the beast says so little. He is not allowed to name himself. He cannot beg, he cannot hope, until she speaks, and in doing so she restores his right to exist. In some versions, the spell is linked to a vow. The girl must promise to return, she must keep her word. If she does not, the beast dies. This is not about romance, it is about covenant, an ancient idea that to promise something is to bind your soul to it, and to break that promise is to unravel reality. In the oldest myths, broken vows lead to floods, wars, and plagues. Words were sacred, oaths were threads holding the world together. So when beauty promises to return and delays, the world begins to come undone, not because she betrayed him, but because she broke the word that held them both in place. The beast himself is a symbol of unspoken truth. He hides, he grunts, he cannot name his pain. He waits for her to find the words he cannot say, and when she does, when she gives language to love, to sorrow, to recognition, he is remade, because to name something is to see it, to say it is to accept it, to love it is to let it live. In the end, Beauty and the Beast is not just a story about falling in love, it is a story about learning to speak what we fear, to speak what we want, to speak what we've been taught to keep buried beneath manners and silence, because silence is where curses grow, and language, raw, trembling, true, is what breaks them. The castle does not speak, but it listens. It opens its doors, lays the table, lights the candelabras, all without a single human touch. But make no mistake, this is no home. It is a tomb, a palace frozen in time, a beautiful prison, not just for the beast, but for everything he once was. In every version of the story, the castle is strangely alive, but not joyful, not warm. It is filled with echoes, hallways that twist, mirrors that show too much, gardens that bloom under a winter sky. It is a place that should not be, like memory. Some scholars argue the castle is a metaphor for the traumatized mind, a psyche frozen in the moment of its breaking. Everything inside still moves, dutiful, mechanical, but nothing changes. Time passes, but nothing heals. The beast walks its halls not as king, but as prisoner. Every room a reminder of what he lost. Every portrait, every candelabra, a memory he cannot touch. He is not angry, he is grieving. And the castle grieves with him. We've seen this structure before. In Gothic novels, the haunted house is never just haunted. It reflects the soul of the one who lives within it. In Poe, it is the House of Usher. In Jane Eyre, it is Thornfield Hall. In mythology, it is Hades' underworld. A place of stillness, not evil, just waiting. And in fairy tales, the cursed castle is always a stage of inversion, where the rules of life do not apply, where mirrors lie and time stalls, and a girl may walk into the heart of death and find herself staring back. So what lives in this castle? Not servants, not magic, but memory of who the beast once was, of what was done to him, of what he did to deserve the curse. It is never explained, not clearly, not directly, and that's the point, because some pain is too old for words. Instead, the house becomes the story, the silence, the space, the endless waiting. When Beauty arrives, she is not just a guest. She is the first new thing to enter the space in years, the first voice not shaped by sorrow, the first step not weighed by regret. And slowly, the castle responds. It softens, it warms, it dares to hope, not because she brings joy, but because she stays. She does not run from the cracked walls. She does not flinch at the silence. She walks its halls like a priestess in a temple that still remembers what it means to be sacred. In this reading, the castle is not enchanted, it is mourning, and the beast is not its master, he is its echo, but Beauty. She is the one who calls the soul back into the walls, not with a spell, but with presence, with witnessing, with the simple, terrifying act of walking deeper instead of turning away. So when the curse breaks, and the chandeliers brighten, and the paintings smile, it is not just magic, it is the return of time, the return of breath, the exhale after centuries of holding it in, because sometimes the greatest miracle is not changing the world, but allowing it to begin again. Why does this story haunt us? Not just charm us, not just entertain us, haunt us. Why do we return to it generation after generation, retelling it in songs, in film, in whispered bedtime versions softened for children? Why do we care so much about a girl who falls in love with a monster? Because the beast is not just him. The beast is us. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the part of ourselves we deny, the rage, the shame, the hunger, the sorrow, the thoughts we pretend we never have, the impulses we suppress in order to belong, but the shadow does not vanish. It waits, and if we do not face it, it grows. It becomes illness, addiction, cruelty, silence. It becomes a curse. In Beauty and the Beast is not a villain. He does not hurt her, he does not manipulate her, but he terrifies her simply by existing, by being something she cannot explain, by wanting something she is not sure she can give, and that is how the shadow appears in all of us. It doesn't knock, it lingers, it watches, it asks, "Will you face me? Will you accept me? Will you name me and still stay?" In dreams, the shadow often takes animal form, a wolf, a lion, a bear, a horned creature whose eyes are too human. Psychologists see this as the psyche's way of showing us what we have buried, instincts, emotion, truths that feel too dangerous to face. But Beauty and the Beast offers a different response, not to fight it, not to slay it, but to sit across the table from it, to eat with it, to speak to it, to know it, and eventually to love it. Not because it's beautiful, but because it is a part of us. And perhaps that's what makes Beauty so powerful. She does not conquer the beast, she does not fix him, she recognizes him, she sees the wounded thing beneath the fur, and in doing so she brings him back into wholeness. This is not a romantic fantasy, this is psychological alchemy. The transformation of fear into tenderness, the turning of instinct into insight, the journey from exile to reintegration. It is the process Jung described as individuation, becoming whole by embracing the parts of the self we have abandoned. That's why the castle heals, why the roses bloom again, why the beast becomes a man, because the inner world is no longer split, the monster is no longer locked in the attic, he is invited to the table, and in that moment, we are no longer two things, we are one, so we keep telling this story over and over. Not because it teaches us how to love another, but because it teaches us how to return to ourselves, to walk into the woods, to open the gate, to sit with the thing we fear most and call it mine, because perhaps the greatest love story of all is the one between us and our shadow. We live in a world that worships beauty, that sells it, that polishes it, filters it, stretches it across screens like a mask we're told to wear. We hide the ugly, we punish the strange, we exile what cannot be explained. But in some corner of our memory, a girl still walks into a ruined castle, a beast still waits beneath a rose, and a question still echoes through the dark, can you love me like this? For 5,000 years we have told this story, not always with roses, not always with fur, sometimes the beast wears a lion's face, sometimes he lives in a maze, sometimes he dies before the girl ever speaks, but always he is the thing we fear, the thing we bury, the part of ourselves we don't want others to see. And always the girl is the one who walks toward it, not with a sword, but with a question, with mercy, with the unbearable strength of not turning away. Some believe Beauty and the Beast is a parable of transformation, others see it as a map of psychological healing, a myth of the feminine gaze restoring the wounded masculine, a mirror of ritual sacrifice and sacred union. All of that may be true, but perhaps it is simpler than that. Perhaps it is about what happens when someone looks at you, truly looks, and does not run. I don't remember the first time I heard this story, only that it stayed, that even as I grew older it never stopped haunting me, not because of the castle, or the magic, or the romance, but because of the silence, the way the beast sat at the end of that long table, alone, waiting. the way he asked the same question every night, and the way he never begged. And something about that felt real. Because we all ask that question in one way or another. In every friendship we don't know how to maintain. In every part of ourselves we think we must hide. In every moment we wonder if love has conditions we'll never meet. And maybe that's why we still tell this story. Not to teach children to be kind, not to remind women to love what's broken, but to whisper to that part inside us, the part that is afraid and furred and waiting that someone might still choose to stay. The beast is not gone. He lives in us, in the corners of our minds where we keep the truths that do not glitter. And beauty? She is the part of us that dares to return, to see, to name, to love before the last petal falls. So we keep the story alive, because in the end it's not just a tale about breaking a curse. It's a prayer for what might still be healed,